Hi all, thank you for joining us.
All,
We're going to get started here in just a couple minutes, or maybe just one more minute. Make sure everyone's able to get logged in here. Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? Hi all, thanks again for joining us. My name is Dave Javid with Plan to Place. I'm part of the Ramey and Associates consultant team helping with this effort. Today's discussion is a part of a series of meetings we have on community conversations around policy frameworks as we continue down the road in preparing different elements of the general plan. Today's meeting is on natural hazards, safety, and climate adaptation. So before we get started, if we can go to the next slide, we do have Spanish interpretation for this meeting. I'm going to ask Jasmine to read this slide and we'll open that room.
hoy, para los que prefieren oír la junta o esta reunión en español, por favor, haga clic donde dice interpretación. Hay un icono de un globo. Si quisiera oír esta junta o esta reunión con interpretación en simultáneo en español, haga clic en el icono del globo y escoja el español como lenguaje. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. And the Spanish room is now available. Okay, if we go on to the next slide, we'll give you a quick overview of the agenda for today. So we've all now hopefully about to settle in. The main part of this meeting is really to give you a brief overview, as I mentioned, the policy framework around this topic and how we've developed that based on all the great information that we've received thus far. As part of that, we'll do some live polling. That live polling will just ask some common questions about the topic and about your understanding and knowledge of this general plan effort in general. So to make it a little more interactive that way. So you'll see those live polls pop up throughout the presentation. And then most importantly, we're going to have time for a small group discussion, and that's really our chance to hear from you. We'll have some discussion prompts, but it'll really just be an informal discussion with you all around this topic. And then as we typically do, we're going to leave time towards the end to report back. So we'll come back to a larger group. And so we can kind of report back on what was talked about in the smaller groups. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps and the host of meetings that are coming up over the next couple of weeks. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the community conversations are really meant to give you an overview again, of all the great information that we've gathered to date, reflecting back on some of that information and how that's kind of formed these technical analyses that will really kind of set the basis of the goals and policies and measures that will continue to evolve as we go through the general plan process. So a really important and key stage in the process. Next. So we do have the chat function open. So throughout the presentation, feel free to pose any questions that you might have about the topic that you're hearing about, and we'll have a little bit of time to address those maybe at the end of the presentation, but most likely during the small group discussion. That's where we really like to focus some of the Q&A, but this gives you an opportunity to ask questions throughout. Again, there'll be live polling that you'll see pop up, and we'll have a code for you to be able to access those live polls, and you'll be able to take those polls on your phones. Really fun, interactive way to get your input. And then following this presentation and this meeting, there's also going to be a survey, which will be actually the policy frameworks themselves, and an ability for you to go on the project website and provide input directly on the frameworks, up and down vote. And we'll show you a little bit more about that functionality, but it's kind of a continuation of the presentation, the discussion today. We want to allow the entire community opportunity to dial in and be able to give us input. And that's all going to be housed on www.shapessf.com. So as I mentioned, a fun and exciting part of this presentation is also to hear directly from you. So what I'd like to ask you to do now is on your phones or on your computers, if you could go to www.mentee.com, that's MENTI.com. And then once you're there, we'll ask that you dial this code. It's 46032240. And we'll put that up in the chat window as well, so that you have access to that code throughout the presentation. And these questions will be available throughout the entire presentation. So if you don't get a chance to take it right away as we present it, there'll be opportunity to do that throughout. So I'm hoping that gave you all enough time to go ahead and dial in. There's also this QR code, very tech savvy, on the screen where you can take a picture of that QR code with your cell phone, and that'll also take you directly to the Mentee survey. And again, the code here, 46032240. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Diana to launch the survey.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. So a few of you have already started. We wanted to start off with a warm-up question. This is not going to impact the general plan framework, but we wanted to know if you're wearing pajamas right now. This is our second meeting. The meeting we had last night started at 6 o'clock, and so there were more folks that were a little bit more willing. Okay, so most folks said no. Let's move on to the next question. How old are you? We want to get an idea. These are questions we tend to ask on the Zoom poll, but we're trying to do things a little different this time. Okay, we have someone that's between 18 to 30, and we have a few folks 31 to 64, and someone over 65. Okay, okay. And the next one, what is your race and or ethnicity? And remember, if you're just getting on right now, you can type in mentee.com and type in that code, and you'll be able to access this. Okay. Now let's move on to the next one. What neighborhood do you live in? We have someone from Sunshine Gardens here. A few from Sunshine Gardens and someone from Winston-Salem. Okay. Let's move on to the next one. What neighborhood do you work in? We have someone who works in downtown and someone who doesn't work in South San Francisco. And then our very last question is, have you ever attended one of our events? We started the general plan in 2019. So it's been a few years now. Okay. Perfect. Well, those are our questions for now. We'll be having a few more questions later on. Thank you for taking part.
Great, thank you, Diana. As you can see, we have a small number of community members with us here today, but just a reminder that these are being recorded and will be added to the project website as a resource. So for those members of the community that didn't get a chance to join us today, there will be an opportunity for them to view the video before they interact with the online resource and survey as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Eric.
Thanks, Dave, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming out on a Tuesday morning. My name is Eric Yarkovich. I'm a principal at Ramey & Associates, and I'm glad to see so many of you have returned to another Shape SSF event. I'm just going to take a few minutes to briefly describe the general plan update, what it's going to address, and some initial community engagement done to date. But first, I'll start with, what the general plan is. It is a long-range policy document for the city, and that every city and county in California are required by the state of California to maintain and regularly update a general plan. The general plan itself really sets forth a 20-year vision for the future, builds on community assets and strengths, while also tackling new and emerging challenges. And the general plan really helps to guide both future policy development as well as development projects within the city. This graphic really shows a simplified process for the general plan update. We kicked off the process with the discovery phase, where we reviewed existing conditions and published a series of reports. And I'll be sharing some of that information around natural hazards and climate hazards today. We then worked with the community as well as the Community Advisory Committee to understand what you love about South San Francisco, what you'd like to see in the future. That listening really helped us to shape the draft vision, core values, and guiding principles for the general plan itself. We then moved into a phase where we looked at land use and land use alternatives in the city. And we've really now kind of pivoted into the next phase of the project, where we're starting to think about what policy and implementation actions will go and complement that preferred land use plan. During the process, we've completed a significant number of kind of community engagement activities, and this slide just includes a snapshot of that engagement to date. These include in-person activities like the visioning workshops and sub-area meetings. And then in the COVID-19 pandemic, we've really pivoted to virtual engagement. These include more virtual workshops, online surveys, and more. We heard a lot of really terrific ideas during the engagement process so far, and it really helped us to shape what some of the key issues are in the city, what are some areas for further policy study, and then, really thinking about what are the types of programs that we need to implement the vision for South San Francisco. And this graphic just illustrates a few of those policy and programmatic ideas that were raised during the land use and mobility alternatives phase of the project. These have been really directly integrated into the policy framework that we'll be reviewing today, but also over the other community conversations we're having around policy. And this really is a graphic that kind of illustrates those different community conversations that we're having right now. So these community conversations are really a step in developing the chapters, or what we call elements, of the general plan. And during the series of these community conversations, we'll be presenting a draft policy framework, which is a document that's available to you for review at shapessf.net. And we'll go there and show you where it is. These really are intended to be sort of 50 to 75% drafts of goals, policies, and implementation actions for the general plan. But we really hope to give everyone an opportunity to provide input on some of those initial ideas before we release a public draft of the plan. And so we wanted to make these documents really easy to review and digestible, so they don't include everything. So if you see something that you don't see something that's important to you, just let us know, and we'll make sure that it gets into the final general plan elements. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the initial steps of the process was developing a community vision and series of guiding principles for the plan. And so as you start to think about the policy framework for safety and climate hazards, really think about how it applies to this vision and set of guiding principles. The vision itself provides an umbrella for the general plan. It articulates where we want to be in 2045. So South San Francisco is a place where everyone can thrive. It's high quality of life, diverse and inclusive community, livable neighborhoods, and excellent services. Culture of innovation and environmental leadership ensure all people have equitable opportunity to reach their full potential. Throughout the engagement process, we heard community members articulate a series of shared values or beliefs. These include innovation, sustainability, equity and inclusion, and livability. And while the vision tells us where we want to be in the future, and the goals, policies, and actions will tell us what we are going to do into the future, these values really articulate how we're going to do the steps in the policy and in the implementation actions. And finally, the guiding principles really define those key outcomes as defined by the community. These include affordable, safe neighborhoods, high quality services, a resilient and convenient transportation network, a resilient community, and a vibrant downtown and prosperous economy. Now I want to transition a little bit and start to talk a little bit about the hazards profile for South San Francisco and what we'll be looking at in the general plan update. And then from there, I'll pivot in and talk about the draft policy framework that we're going to be reviewing today. So really the purpose of the general plan safety element is to protect the community from a broad range of risks associated with different kinds of hazards. So these include things like seismic hazards, slope instability like landslides, wildfires, flooding, and climate change, to name a few. And we already know that California and South San Francisco are already experiencing the effects of a changing climate, and the impacts are projected to worsen even with only moderate increases in greenhouse gas emissions. Both gradual climate change, things like sea level rise, and climate hazards, things like extreme heat days or high rainfall events, expose people and buildings to a wide range of different types of hazards. Climate change is anticipated to exacerbate or enhance some of the existing hazards in the city in terms of those natural hazards. So things like flooding will change over time in the future. And while the list of these impacts on the left can really seem a little bit overwhelming, the solutions to climate change are both workable and cost effective. They can improve our quality of life while also limiting and adapting to changes in the climate. South San Francisco is located in one of the most seismically active regions in the United States. The San Andreas Fault, for instance, is located in the westernmost corner of the city, running through the Westboro planning subarea. Areas in the city also have the potential for liquefaction and settlement during earthquake shaking. So areas along the coast, areas along Coma Creek, San Bruno Creek, and Navigable Slough in particular are more susceptible to that type of liquefaction. Building and infrastructure design standards, as well as retrofitting programs like Earthquake Brace and Bolt, can really help reduce the long-term risks of these hazards. And South San Francisco is exposed to both coastal flooding and stormwater flooding, and both types of flooding are anticipated to be exacerbated or changed by the impacts of climate change. This map on your screen shows the extent of the 100-year flood map. These areas were identified by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, on the National Flood Insurance Program maps. These areas are located, you can see them located along Coma Creek, Navigable Slough, San Bruno Creek, and the San Francisco Bay. And this map builds on that earlier FEMA 100-year flood map. Based on state guidance for sea level rise, it expands the 100-year flood with 3 feet of sea level rise. This shows the extent of what that potential flooding might be in about 2070 to 2100, so towards the end of this century. Now, it's not enough just to understand what the hazards are, but it's also important to think about how those hazards expose people, buildings, infrastructure, and ecosystems to climate hazards or to natural hazards. So this is just a very simple diagrammatic example of some of the infrastructure assets that are exposed to sea level rise and flooding. These include things like the San Francisco International Airport, the Water Quality Control Plant, Highway 101, and Caltrain. And it's not just infrastructure that's exposed to climate hazards like sea level rise and flooding, but it also exposes almost $3.5 billion in market value of property and land that houses almost over 16,000 employees. Those businesses contribute an estimated $42 million in property and hotel taxes to the city. It also exposes 56 acres of marshland, which provides valuable habitat to birds and critters along the Bay Edge. And back at the Sea Level Rise Forum in January, which I'll talk about in a little bit, our speakers really talked about some of the ongoing efforts to protect these assets and build resilience to flooding along the South San Francisco coast. The safety element will also cover wildfires. And while there are no wildfire hazard zones within the city boundaries, the San Bruno Mountains to the outside of the city, just to the north, have moderate and high wildfire susceptibility. And likewise, Scion Hill is a large open space, and the vegetation area needs to be continually managed to mitigate wildfire risk. And while the exposure to wildfire in South San Francisco may be relatively low, regional wildfires are having a huge impact on air quality around the Bay Area. These are some of the images from the Camp Fire, which elevated air pollution levels in San Francisco and the surrounding Bay Area to the poorest air quality in the world for almost a week. The smoke resulted in a big uptick in the number of emergency room visits for things like respiratory and heart complaints. And like flooding, climate change is expected to exacerbate some of those conditions that lead to wildfires. So drought, changes in precipitation, warmer weathers, and drought around the state of California and the West. And like sea level rise and warming temperatures, extreme heat events in California and South San Francisco are becoming more frequent, more intense, and lasting longer. And the number of extreme heat days is anticipated to increase significantly across the Bay Area during the next century, but more so inland than in coastal communities. So by the sort of the mid-century, sort of the time horizon of the general plan, South San Francisco is expected to have about 9 extreme heat days per year. Now, I'm often asked, why does it matter that we are having this increase in warming and these higher temperatures? But this is just one very simple graphic that explains how extreme heat affects health. So rising temperatures and more frequent heat waves and extreme heat days can result in heat stress. And the combination of heat and humidity in particular can lead to more cases of heat stroke and even death among healthy people. And then the urban heat island effect can exacerbate local temperatures in anywhere in the Bay Area, but by reflecting up the warmer temperatures that are coming down and reflecting it off of paved surfaces. And that can really increase those temperatures in small areas locally. And research shows that on average of days that are 10 degrees above average, we can see an increase in death by all causes by 3 to 5%. So it has a real impact on people's health. And when we think of the folks who are most at risk to both climate change and to natural hazards, we often focus on both the social and the biological factors that increase people's susceptibility. So biological factors that impact individuals include things like age, mental health, physical disabilities, for example, and social factors include things like our environment, so access to green space, whether you have access to social support and other services. But this does miss a really important fact that many of these kind of social factors are really driven by a series of root or contributing causes. And if we look at those the root causes, it means looking beyond healthcare to the role of the urban environment and broader socioeconomics to really understand who's at risk to natural and climate hazards. And the reality is that many communities of color, lower income residents are often burdened with multiple overlapping factors that cumulatively impact not only their health, but also their ability to adapt and respond to natural hazards and climate hazards. And this map illustrates just where some of those most sensitive and overburdened populations are in South San Francisco. So downtown, Orange Park have populations with higher socioeconomic and health vulnerabilities and are burdened with higher levels of pollution already. And so we also know that there are other neighborhoods and subpopulations throughout the city who are going to be sensitive to the impacts of these hazards and these climate hazards in the future as well. And then finally, the safety element will also tackle a number of other issues that we're not going to focus on today, but those will include things like landslides, tsunami risk, drought, airport safety, and hazardous material, amongst others. And the safety element itself will build on the significant work that's already been done in the city and the planning and work projects that are already ongoing. And this is just a simple list of a few of those examples that are already either completed or in process of completion. It includes the San Mateo County Hazard Mitigation Plan, which is being updated now. And the safety element really will build on that local hazard mitigation plan and be incorporated by reference into the general plan. And the city is also has also completed or is in the process of working on a number of plans and projects to address sea level rise and flooding. This includes ongoing work with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Coma Creek Adaptation Project, as well as work with the Flood and Sea Level Rise Resiliency District. And throughout the planning process, community members identified a number of priorities related to safety and climate hazards. These include transforming Coma Creek into a public amenity, creating a comprehensive sea level rise strategy, and ensuring Lindenville and east of 101 are protected from sea level rise. And back in January, we hosted a community advisory committee forum on sea level rise and flooding. We had 4 really terrific speakers, and if you haven't had a chance to check out that material, there's a link here at the bottom of the screen. We talked a little bit about what's happening kind of regionally in terms of climate change, some ideas for nature-based solutions to adaptation. We talked a little bit about building resilience along Coma Creek, and we ended with a presentation about the ongoing work that South San Francisco is doing around sea level rise and flooding. And if you haven't had a chance, it's a really great set of speakers that's worth listening into. All right, so final part of the presentation, I'm gonna kind of take what we learned from the technical analysis, the community engagement, and that's really kind of laid the foundation for the policy framework that we're gonna be talking about in our small groups today. So the policy framework is a physical document on the Shape SSF website. And the following presentation is really just going to summarize some of the highlights from that policy framework. So I encourage you to go out and read the full document. And again, as I mentioned earlier, these are really interim steps to the general plan element because we want to get your feedback before the whole plan is drafted. This slide really illustrates the basic structure of that policy framework, and we're going to be talking about different components of that today. It includes key outcomes describing where we want to be in 2040, and then the goals, policies, and measures articulate some of the things that we're going to do to get there. And this general plan also has a strong focus on tracking and measuring performance. So I also identified a series of metrics to track performance in the safety element, as well as targets to measure the level of performance over time. Now, let's start with the good stuff. So we're getting into the components of the policy framework. On your screen now, you'll see 3 desired outcomes. These really articulate where we're trying to get to at the conclusion of the general plan. So in 2040, what are the outcomes we want to see? So the first is city operations will not be significantly disrupted by climate change and natural disasters. The second is community assets will not be threatened by future flood events and sea level rise. And the third is residents, particularly the most vulnerable residents, are protected from climate and hazard impacts. We're going to come back to these in our small group discussions and talk about these specifically. And you're welcome to add any thoughts that you have on these, whether there are other outcomes we want to achieve. For example, last week at our CAC meeting, we heard that we wanted to add an outcome about an engaged and a knowledgeable community about the climate hazards as well as natural hazards. To measure the performance of the city over time, we drafted sort of an initial set of performance metrics for the safety element. These include process metrics like the percentage of plans that address climate change impacts and the number of sea level rise and flooding projects completed, and then outcome metrics like the number of repetitive loss claims. So into the goals. This first goal really focuses on proactively advancing community resilience through improvements in capital planning, plan and policy development, and partnerships. Resilience is really about the ability to adapt to changing conditions and withstand and rapidly recover from disruption. This is often discussed in the context of climate change, but it also relates to all sorts of other types of shocks and stressors, things like earthquakes or even the pandemic. In particular, I wanted to call out the idea of requiring infrastructure projects in high hazard and sea level rise zones to adhere to more stringent guidelines. And because these issues are regional in nature, the continued participation in regional hazard mitigation and climate adaptation groups, work groups and initiatives. One emerging initiative that you have maybe heard about is at the Sea Level Rise Forum is the County Flood and Sea Level Rise Resiliency District. They are really a coordinating partner with South San Francisco and all of the regional cities to help identify and implement solutions across the region. They can help leverage state and federal funds for improvements, including on projects like Como Creek. And as we start to think about climate adaptation and sea level rise, these are really regional issues that are going to affect the entire shoreline. And so we need regional partnerships and work groups to really think through the solutions that are most effective for the entire region. Next, we wanted to ensure that the city's critical facilities have the needed capabilities to continue operations during and after future hazard events. And we've identified a couple of very specific actions. The first is to enhance the capacity of the city's Emergency Operations Center. And the second is to create a Resiliency Hubs program. These Resiliency Hubs are really a new old idea. It's a physical location in the community where residents and businesses can get the support they need when they need it. And as an example of the Resiliency Hubs, the San Francisco Empowered Communities Program Neighborhood Hub Initiative is an example of a Resilience Hub program. These hubs really provide an opportunity for residents to come together to develop neighborhood-based solutions for hazard mitigation programs and improve household readiness, right? So you can build your readiness kit so you're prepared when those hazards start. And then during and after events, they become places where people can go for assistance, information, and other post-hazard needs. They'll often have things like food, water, blankets, and emergency backup power. And now traditionally, these hubs have been housed in public or city-owned facilities. However, increasingly, they're being housed in buildings that are run by trusted community partners like churches and other service providers. The next goal focuses on minimizing the impacts of earthquakes and seismic hazards in the city, and specific actions include municipal focus measures like improved mapping techniques and regular assessment and retrofit of city-owned facilities and buildings. But there are also community programs like helping improve access to retrofit programs like the Earthquake Brace and Bolt program, which is a state program, and maintaining inventories of soft-story housing or affordable housing. The next goal is really a new one for this general plan and safety element. It focuses on protecting existing and future development from sea level rise and flooding. At the Sea Level Rise Forum back in January, City Manager Mike Puchel really talked about the city work with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on developing options for protecting the water quality control plant and the development of the east of 101 shoreline. You also heard a little bit from Jeremy Lowe from the San Francisco Estuary Institute talking about opportunities for nature-based solutions to improve ecosystem resilience, particularly in the mouth of Como Creek. And additionally, this really calls out updating local codes to require flood-proofing techniques from new development. So areas that are exposed to future sea level rise, they might have to raise the land with fill, increase the height of their finished floor of their buildings, or find additional space for water on their properties or in streets or in public parks to really manage stormwater. The next goal really focuses on that transformation of Como Creek, which we've talked about pretty extensively during the general plan update process. It really expands the objectives of the creek corridor to not only mitigate flood risk and sea level rise, but also to provide opportunities to restore ecosystems, improve public access and pathways along the creek. And at the Sea Level Rise Forum, Richard Mulhoon really talked about the Colma Creek Adaptation Planning Project with the city and the Flood and Sea Level Rise Resiliency District. It's really a model for this type of integrated flood protection, ecology, and public access project. And this type of project really brings together those different objectives with an opportunity to really transform sections and stretches of Colma Creek. And the next goal focuses on the emerging hazards like extreme heat and poor air quality. This goal has an explicit focus on the most underserved residents or the most traditionally marginalized residents with targeted weatherization programs, early warning systems, and even preventing utility shutoffs during high heat days. And then finally, the last goal for me to go over today is really focuses on reducing the risk from wildfire. It continues an ongoing program for wildfire mitigation on Sign Hill, as well as comprehensive fire management programs across the city. And with that, we want to hear a little bit from you. We're going to do a quick Mentee poll that my colleague Diana Benitez will go through with you. So if you can go to mentee.com again, your code should already be in there, but the code is up on the screen for you now. Diana?
Perfect. Can I share my screen? Thank you. Okay, so we're going over a few of the policies and the actions that Eric spoke about, and so we want to know what your perspective is. These are framed into 3 different questions. So for this one, it looks like new city capital projects should account for sea level rise, and really liking nature-based solutions seem to be really liked. Now, if we move on to the next, oh no, let's give it a little bit more. Okay, let's go on to the next one. The next one is similar scaling, agree to disagree. We have 3 more statements. New development in sea level rise risk areas should use adaptation measures. We have one that says new development in sea level rise risk areas should build on fill or elevate buildings. And then emphasizing that property sales should disclose sea level rise risk areas. Similarly, the top and the bottom one have more votes. Okay. Now on to the last one. Same, we're talking about scale, but the 2 statements we have here are using green infrastructure in Colma Creek to reduce flooding, or prioritizing low-income or marginalized groups in weatherization programs. And you can select both as, you know, strongly agree or whatever scale. Okay. So far, they're both at the same level. Okay, and remember, if you weren't able to answer the questions right this instant, they're still open. So even as we move into breakout groups, you can add in your information. And with that, I'll pass it back on.
Thank you, Diana. Eric, I think if you want to bring back up your screen, thank you. Excellent. So what we did have planned initially for this section was to have you all break up into small groups, but considering we already are such a small, intimate group, I think it might be best for us to stay here in the main room together, and we could have the conversation together here. And Eric, if you go to the next slide, we don't need to worry about this. We're really just going to kind of stay together here and go through the discussion as a group. So if we go to the next slide, we had just some general topical questions that we wanted to walk you through, just some discussion topics, but again, really open to kind of get your feedback and have just an informal discussion with you, really to talk about any other outcomes to consider, and we can bring the goals back up so you all kind of get a better sense of how that fits in and of the ideas presented, which one you might like best, thinking about policy ideas that are not listed that we should consider, and then anything else you'd like to share that relates to safety and climate adaptation. So if that works for you all, I think it'd be easier than to shift into a couple super small groups. We can just have a larger discussion here with you all. There are quite a few members of city staff that are here with us as well, to help answer questions. So why don't we do that and just get started? Eric, do you want to take back over if you want to bring up the slides if needed and walk folks through the discussion? Or are you exhausted after all that presentation?
Well, I can talk. I think as all of you know me, I can keep talking if you guys want. Yeah, but I'd like to, let's go ahead and start. For those who are here to participate, if you could maybe flip on your video for just a second, even if you're doing other things, it would be great to see you. And I'd like to just do a round of introductions of everyone who's in the room. So we can get everybody to do, it'd be awesome, including you city staff folks who are around too. Hi, Sharon. Great. A few more folks, maybe. Awesome. Awesome, great. I'm glad that you guys were all willing to do that. So let's just go around and maybe everyone just do a quick introduction, introduce yourself. Tell us one thing that we wouldn't know about you. One interesting fact that we wouldn't know about you. Sharon, you're in my top left square, so I'm going to call on you first. And then I would like, Sharon, when you're done, I would like you to call on the next person.
Okay, hi, I'm Sharon Reynolds. I'm the Assistant City Manager. I think one thing about me is I'm kind of a crazy gardener. I love to garden and I do these weird vignettes in my front yard. And then when I don't do them, the neighbors are like, what's coming next? So that's me. Let's see, and I'll go with Paul Krosner.
Hello all, Paul Kronzer here with Plan to Place, assisting with the team on keeping track of all some great content that we'll come up with today. One interesting fact about me that you probably all don't know is I don't live in the Bay Area. So I am out closer to the foothills near Auburn and Lake Tahoe. So excited to be here with you all. And I will call on, let's go Diana.
Hello, everyone. My name is Diana Benitez, and I'm working with Raymond Associates, so also taking notes in the background. And I'll also be leading tomorrow's meeting on health, equity, and environmental justice. Something that folks may not know about me, I've been playing the violin for more than 13, 14 years now. And I will call on Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa Costa-Sanders, Project Administrator for the General Plan Update. You may not know, I'm a former professional arm wrestler, and I'll hand it off to Billy Griffs.
Billy Gross, Senior Planner with the City of South San Francisco in the Planning Division. And what I just learned about myself is I am now scared to hang out with Lisa because I don't want to get beaten arm wrestling. I'm going to hand it off to Olga.
Well, I'm not a very interesting person after the arm wrestling and everything like that. I don't know. I just like to educate myself, just learn things, reading and learning about history. I just love history.
How about Kenneth? Would you like to introduce yourself, Kenneth?
Is there Ken Anderson? Is that who you're asking? Yeah, Ken Anderson with the City of South San Francisco Fire Department. I'm the emergency manager. Some of you know this, but I've been a soccer coach at the local high school here in South San Francisco for the last 28 years, varsity boys soccer.
Janice, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm retired from the education system, and I'm a caregiver for a 93-year-old resident in South San Francisco. So I'm looking for answers for her and me.
Great, thanks, Janice. Roderick, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Roderick. I'm a resident of South City. Something people don't know about me. I don't know what people don't know. I have a minor in film studies, I guess. Some trivia.
Roderick is also a member of the General Plan Community Advisory Committee. Suhaila? Nope, nope. All right, while you're working on your phone, Mike.
Sure, Mike Cottrell. I'm the city manager for South San Francisco, and I'm a runner and a hiker, and I'm planning a big camping trip with my son, James.
That's awesome.
Oh, then I get to pick on somebody. Or
you
you
get to pick on someone.
Eric. I've kind of lost track of, but I don't think Ashley has spoken up. So Ashley Crociani. Or maybe Tony Rossi. Either one is great.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Hi, I'm Ashley. I'm in the city manager's office, and my fun fact is in kindergarten, I got stung by a bee every week for 2 months.
Wow.
That doesn't sound fun.
No.
Okay. Marie, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, it looks like Marie just actually posted hers in chat. She says she's having trouble, I think, maybe with her microphone. I could read it for you all. She says she loves trees and helped to increase the tree canopy in South San Francisco by going door to door, gaining permission from homeowners. That's awesome.
That's awesome. Totally. Tony.
Well, good morning, afternoon, I guess. Tony Rossi in the planning division. And a fun fact about me this week is that I've been trying to get my daughter to wear this tiny little shirt with my face as a preschooler. And she keeps saying it is ugly and she will not wear it. She's not even 5, so don't have a 5-year-old there. Vicious.
It's easier when they're 6. And then I think maybe one other person in the participants view. That's Paulo. We're just doing brief introduction. Hi.
Hi.
Introduce yourself and
yes.
Go ahead.
My name is Paulo. I moved to Bay Area in 2018. I came to work as a youth pastor in a church called Message of Peace, located in Miller with Spruce. And I've been living in South San Francisco since then. I love the city. I love the is trying to get more people to discuss those talks and those important issues that we need to address in the city to make the city grow. I'm originally from Brazil, so I speak Portuguese as well. And I love Latinos, I love the community. And I'm here, I wanna learn more. I know that you have much more to teach me, but I'm thank you for the great opportunity.
Oh, great, we're excited to have you here, and I'm excited about your enthusiasm to participate. It's really awesome. Is there anyone else I missed in the participants who hasn't introduced themselves?
I think that covers it.
Right,
There was one other person that said she might be on a call to not call on her, so I think we're good.
Okay. All right, well, the first thing we're gonna do is talk about those outcomes, right? So I'm gonna put them back up on the screen just very, very briefly, and so you can just see them all again, and let me know if you can see my screen okay. And we just wanna know from you, and I dropped the questions in the chat for you all, so you have them in the chat as well, so if you take a look at that. But we just really wanna get your sense of what you think about these outcomes for the general plan. And these are things that we're trying to achieve through the implementation of the general plan itself. Do these seem about right to you? Are there other things that you think of about outcomes that you want to make sure that the general plan achieves through this time horizon? Just open it up for comments.
How do we comment?
Well, you can. We have a running Google Doc where we're taking notes for this conversation. So you have the floor, Janice. Any comments that you have about these outcomes? Just let us know.
Thanks. Well, I've lived in the city for 3 years, and I like these outcomes here. From my point of view, then, my question is, where do I go for information when there is a hazard such as poor air quality or the possibility of a wildfire near my house? Where do I go for information, updated information?
I'm going to ask one of the city staff to respond. It's a great question, Janice. I appreciate your response. I'm going to ask one of the city staff if they'd like to respond to that question.
Mm-hmm. I can. This is Ken Anderson. So one of the places is you can go to smcalert.com and opt in to receive messages from city departments, such as the fire department, police department, or even public works. And I think that's probably the best place. And then also we do a great job. We have a very good social media platforms that we use. We use all our social media. So Facebook, each department has their own Twitter account as well. So if you're hooked up to social media, and then our city webpage as well. So I think those are a couple of good areas that you could be tuned into. If you're not on social media, then the SMC Alert one is a great opt-in to receive those pertinent information before, during, and after a disaster.
Okay, so then I can do that. But if I'm no longer the caregiver for this 93-year-old woman, her daytime caregiver is not electronically knowledgeable. So is there any phone number where they could call? Let's say there's a wildfire that's coming close to their house and they don't know where they can go. How do they get information if they don't even own computers?
Yeah, at that point in time, you'd have someone knocking on your door providing that information for you.
Okay.
Especially if there was an evacuation that needs to be done. We also have another thing, but you have to have a computer, which is it's a zone haven. And that tells you what zone you live in for those typical things like a wildland fire that might have to have you evacuate your house. And that's zonehaven.com. And that's another place where you can go and know what zone you live in so that if we do have an emergency like that where you're going to be evacuated, you'll get information from that webpage as well.
Great, thank you.
But smcalert.com is the best place to go to start off and opt in to receive those messages. And what that does is it pings your cell phone. So if you own a cell phone, it sends you either a text or rings your phone and gives you a call back.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thanks for asking.
Ken, I just wanted to add, if you'd like to take the city manager's desk phone number, we're happy to try and field calls as well. So that number is 650-877-8501. I mean, for not emergency numbers, but like if you just have questions about who's doing this or where can I find rental assistance, we're happy to refer you as well.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
And I just want to link that into the general plan too, because I think there's, we want to make sure that information, I know a lot of people are moving into more and more digital means of communication and distribution of information, but making sure that there are lots of different opportunities and pathways for information to reach different community members. That's very much a general plan kind of activity and policy. So we can bring that back, that kind of issue up to that level. Is there any comments on those outcomes? I know we talked about at the general plan advisory committee, adding one around an educated community who both understands the hazards and hazard risks, as well as what programs are out there that can help them reduce those risks as one of those outcomes. Are there any other thoughts from folks on those?
Yeah, I know we talked about that at the at the general plan meeting, but with Janice's comments too. I think part of that, like being an informed community, could include, like the city newsletter and some of the other city communications, including like how you can get on the SMC alert and, how you can be informed about not just like, upgrading your house for climate change or whatever, but also for like immediate emergencies too.
Thanks, Roderick. Anyone else? Okay. All right, so we also want to hear from you guys a little bit. I went through at about 100 miles an hour, a lot of different kind of goals, policy ideas, and actions. And I'm happy to pull up any of those for us to go through. But we just wanted to know kind of those policy ideas or goals, and I'll put the goals up on the screens. Like which ones did you see and you thought, oh, I really like that. I think that's really good. Are there things that you thought were not there or not listed that you thought we had maybe missed in those, either kind of broadly speaking or more specifically? And I'll pull up a slide of the goals just so you can see all of them on one slide. Any of these ideas in particular you thought looked good to you, you really liked? Anything you saw you didn't like, or things you thought weren't there that we should add in? Who'd like to kick us off?
So this is Ken. So I'll speak a little bit. So number 2 bullet point there, critical facilities have the necessary capabilities. I think having capabilities in there is very important. That's one that gets often missed is, do we really have the capabilities? We have the capabilities, we may have the capabilities now, but will we have the capabilities in 15 years? So I'm glad to see that in there. I've also lived in the city my whole life. So 54 years, this is where I'm lucky enough to work and live. So, I'm glad we're looking at ways to minimize, not only earthquake hazards, but also sea level rise. I know the airport's doing a lot of work right now, and we'll be continuing over the next 5 years to build a seawall to protect themselves, not only from sea rise, but also from tsunami effects. So, and how will that affect our city as well along the Bay Coast? I think that's something that we have to look at. And I think that's part of the whole Coma Creek initiative that we have going on. So we're doing a lot of talk and work on how we can improve the Coma Creek and how that helps our city in mitigation to flooding. So I think you have 7 good ones up there. I'm sure if I had a little bit more time, I could come up with a few more, but I'll stop talking and allow some other folks to talk as well.
Thanks, Ken. Paolo, Olga, Janice.
Well, I like that it says that, I'm looking at number 2, that facilities can continue operations after a future hazard, because that means that you're looking to not have total disruption of activities and of people's lives. So I like that's a proactive goal.
Great, thanks.
I would also say number 6, a city prepared for combined impacts of extreme heat and poor air quality. So unfortunately, over the last 5 years, we've had, and you would think, oh, city of South San Francisco, extreme heat, they don't go together, correct? But we have had a few days that run into each other lengthwise, and overnight we don't have the Mother Nature's cooling blanket come in, the fog, and where we have extreme heats in the high to mid 80s, which doesn't seem a lot for other places, but here that doesn't allow us to cool down at night, and then we roll into another temperature day of 100 degrees, and we've had a few of those over the last couple of years, so much so that we've had to open cooling stations in our city. So I'm glad to see that on there, and have a plan for extreme heat, not only the city of South San Francisco, but the county as a whole. So that's fairly new over the last 3 or 4 years. And then the poor air quality, we all know majority of the time those are due to wildland fires, but it's also also due to just having those extreme heat days, as well as just the way we run our lives daily now with all the fossil fuels that are being burned. So the poor air quality is also due to those type of things. So glad that's on there.
Ken, do you want to talk a little bit about where those cooling centers are in the city? Are they at like the library or?
Yeah. So we're pretty lucky. We have a very robust Parks and Recs department and a very robust library system. So much so that we have 2 libraries in our city. And then our Parks and Recs folks have been willing and been great folks to help us with when it comes to the cooling centers and operating cooling centers in a city facility. So our facilities and our Parks and Recs folks, and then our library system. So we use our libraries, and we've so much so that we've extended our hours on certain days to allow residents to stay longer in our libraries in a cooled AC roomed building. And then also same thing, we've opened parts of our MSB building or other city facilities, such as the Fernikes building, and then with our CERT team and our Parks and Recs and facilities folks, just been able to staff them even on holiday weekend. So I'm very lucky as the emergency manager to have such great teams willing to help when it comes to that. And that's pretty much what we've done. And we've opened those cooling stations a couple times over the last couple of years. And we accept pets. They've been really nice to allow cats and dogs come in as well. So, you know, even during a pandemic, we were able to do it. So pretty cool thing with like I said, with our Parks and Recs team and our library system.
Thanks, Ken. I actually appreciate that. I wonder if Olga or Janice or Paulo would like to maybe comment on this a little bit. Have you guys ever been to one of the city's cooling centers? Did you know that they existed? And then also, I mean, I'm quite interested in what you actually do during high heat days or bad air quality days. Like, I know I personally like hunker down and with my family in one room of our house, which is the best sealed and the coolest. But I wonder if there are other things you all do to make sure that you're safe during those types of events.
This is Olga. What we do, luckily we have a basement, so we all just going in the basement. But I don't know too much about climate change, but I think this goes hand in hand with sustainability in yesterday's meeting, and you know how what we can do ourselves, you know, to help with climate change. I think this is what the topic is about today, and you know these goals are a little bit they're just, I think it's way beyond my head to be able to understand, you know, most of these. I'm going to be very honest, but one of the questions that I saw, or one of during the survey, I had thought about this before, and knowing a little bit about what the noise abatement program is about, what I was thinking is, you know, how if the city could, you know, secure funding for homeowners, you know, to place, you know, energy efficient windows. I know that's a huge cost. You know, I was thinking about that, and then, you know, what I mentioned at yesterday's meeting, you know, in terms of sustainability, you know, what we can do, you know, ourselves and you know, as a community, you know, for example, having a community garden, you know, having sustainable food sources, you know, rain barrels, recycling water programs, you know, not to be such a water wasters, you know, I think, you know, or affordable solar panels. So I think this topic, you know, I think it goes hand in hand with sustainability. But I was, you know, even before the survey question, I had jotted this question down about, you know, a program for energy efficient windows. And, you know, we're not in the noise abatement, you know, area, you know, they have this, you know, area, but that would be something, you know, that perhaps, you know, funding may be secured somewhere. You know, with climate change, I remember as a child, I vaguely remember seeing snow on Sign Hill or San Bruno Mountain. I don't remember right now, but you know, fog and rain, and the rain is just not there anymore. And you know, with these extreme heats during the summer, you know, luckily we have a basement, but a lot of people don't have basements. And I didn't know about the cooling stations, centers at the libraries. I really didn't know about that. So I think that's really all I have to say. So thank you.
Thanks, Olga. That's a really great idea. Paulo or Janice?
I'm kind of like Olga. I don't have much to add on that. I don't know much about climate change, but I can tell you this. I came from, I don't know if you ever heard about Amazon in Brazil, jungle, the rainforest. I'm from there. And there it's really hot. It's a tropical area. Of course, it's different than from here, but it's really hot. It gets really hot in some seasons of the year. And what the city does, we plant trees along the streets, and they try to have more trees because it helps with the shade. It helps to keep the air like to renew the air, and it's not so hard in these areas, in these neighborhoods where you have more trees. So if I could add anything, any comment on the extreme heat. I remember last year, I think, yeah, summer, I don't remember exactly when, but it was extremely hot here in South City. And we don't have a basement, but we had to rely on the fence and all of that. But if I had anything to add to what you said, Eric and everyone, is trees, the more trees. It helps. Thank you.
This is Janice. I just wanted to say that I did not know about the cooling centers, but I figured they probably would have been in the library. And I do know that the library is a good place to call for information. The houses here in this area are not built for heat. There's no screen doors, there's no screen windows on these old houses. So the cooling centers are a great idea.
What do you do, Janice, when it was really, really hot last year? What did you do?
I ran out and tried to buy a fan at I don't know how many stores.
Yeah.
And when I got home, this lady, she's 93 years old, she was so hot, I was fearful for her health. And so I opened the doors, even though at night, then in the evening, we didn't feel safe with the house doors just open. So if the heat had lasted one more day, I would have called the library to look for some other solution, like a cooling center.
Thank you. What about you, Roderick? Did you know about the cooling center program, and what kind of things do you do during either those high heat days or all these wildfire smoke days we're getting more and more of?
Yeah, I did know about the cooling center. Well, they have them at Parks and Rec. I live down the street a little bit from there, so I go by there every now and then and see the doors open, and they have the glasses of water out. But yeah, when it's really hot here, we try to like hunker down. We have a bunch of fans. We like try to keep the windows open. But yeah, to Janice's point, like my partner gets like a little paranoid about like leaving the window open overnight. So like yeah. It's also hard when there's the wildfires too, because then you have to weigh like the smoke versus the that. But we just got AC this last fall, so hopefully that helps. Yeah, the one other thing I was thinking when Paul was talking was about the trees and about canopy and the green space. We've talked a little bit about Colma Creek and like the ecology there. And just, this isn't like a fully formed thought, but like people aren't the only things that are going to be affected by climate change. You know, there's the whole ecology of San Bruno Mountain, and you know, we know too that the wildfires are a concern there, and so the fuel load has to be kept under control, and yada yada yada. I wonder if there's something we can put about like having more habitat through the city, so that, you know, like creatures from the mountains have like refuges as climate changes there too.
Totally. And all of this is linked, right? So the benefits of urban greening and trees have benefits for the birds and the bees and all of the insects and critters that are moving through our cities. And as climate changes, they need space to move, and their range and habitat's going to change. And so the more we can provide some of that space in cities, the better. And I think we talk about it through like a framework of thinking about kind of how you create patches of space, right? Smaller patches of space. They could be parks, you know, they could be gardens. and then how you connect them, right? And so those could be open space corridors, right? Like along Colma Creek or up along, there's PG&E, these PG&E power corridors. Those could be corridors for critters. And then, but the urban forest is also a really good way of connecting those spaces together. So it's a great comment. And I think all these things are connected, like rain gardens, solar panels, all of these things kind of overlap with one another to make more resilient communities. So I think that all kind of fits together neatly in conversation. Is there anything else you guys want to share with us today on hazards or climate change that you want our team to know about?
Eric, this is Ken again.
Yeah.
So, hey,
hi, Ken.
you just brought up a pretty good thing, and that's where. So we're trying to make our city as resilient as possible, but we also rely on other agencies to help us out. So for instance, we just talked about high heat days and maybe also having smoke in the air, right? So bad air quality days all at the same time. And then also, don't forget, we have the trifecta, and that's where PG&E turns off our power, right? So we have this thing called PSPS, and we've had a couple of those days where the weather affects that. And I think we all just saw what happened in Texas due to cold weather and the power grid. And so, it's great that we're trying to make our city as resilient as possible. And I think that's the important part. Can we live a day or two without power right now in South San Francisco? So unfortunately, it's not good for me to hear that people aren't getting the word that we're all the information that we push out. And we have a communications department, and she does a great job. We all work together. And it's super important that people opt in to SMC Alert, and then also look at our city's webpage or call the city hotline that Sharon talked about. But then also, I get it. Somehow, some way, track social media as well, because that's how we push out a lot of information. We do it in a newsletter as well, like the gentleman said. And a lot of the times we have articles in there on exactly what to do during certain situations. And I think preparedness is another thing. We all become urban campers on those few days where high heat is in our city, and we're outside longer and barbecuing and doing all those things, which are great. But preparedness we know sometimes we can tell when weather's coming in, and we start pushing out messages right away on our social media and on our web pages and stuff to give tips on how to prepare for those hot days. And I think someone said it best. Myself, as a citizen or a resident of South San Francisco, I have to do what I have to do to prepare to take care of my family. And I think sometimes we forget about those hot days. So, and what would happen if we didn't have power for a day or two during those hot days, which would make it even worse. And the importance of finding those critical infrastructure buildings in our city that can run on a generator and also provide great AC and air filtration all at the same time. So, and we have those buildings, and we've picked them out, and those are the ones we use. So once again, with all the help from other departments as well.
I was just going to add, this is Billy Gross with the planning department. Just to add, I know that through library, the city is trying to do, through the library department, the city is trying to do an effort to better connect with like the neighborhoods and just kind of determine community partners. And I think this just emphasizes how important that sort of outreach is when we don't have, because it's true, not everyone's going to have social media or be relying on their computers. And I know that that's obviously the way that we push the most, but we have to look for those other non-tech routes as well, and make sure that we have those community groups, community partners, agencies and such that the smaller neighborhoods can reach out to, and they can better disassemble this type of information to our community in a way that maybe will make it easier for everyone to hear about these things.
And we have a pretty robust chamber as well, Eric. And I know I use them a lot. And that gets back to the community via the small business owners. So the small business owners post a flyer in their window or tell their customers. So I think absolutely right. That's another way of us looking at how we can get the outreach out. There's we're always in for better ways to communicate with our community, church groups, word of mouth, our CERT team, whatever it takes. We try to get the word out there. But Billy's absolutely correct.
Thanks, Ken and Billy. Anything else?
Eric, it looks like you have a
Otherwise,
hand raised.
Yes, this is Olga. I just wanted to thank Billy. I didn't want to, just jump in, but I wanted to thank Billy because that was going to be one of my questions. How did you, outreach to non-English speakers? And I think churches are a great way. We're still distributing the Shape SSF, flyers, and even with just, the topics, there's a lot of, people that are confused, what does sustainability mean? What does climate mean? And then my husband was distributing the business relief flyers to the non-English speakers as well. And when I happened to, we happened to go downtown, and I think, well, let's get something to eat. And I think, well, let's stop by these businesses, might as well. So we stopped by again, and then come to find out that they didn't know how to apply. And the phone number that was listed, it was for the Great Plates program. And they didn't know how to use a QR code. So we thought, oh my goodness, we didn't know that. So we actually help with our own phone, help a lot of these businesses apply, but there's many non-English speakers of all races, all nationalities, and come to find out, even with the flyer, they were skeptical. And the business owners that I do know, they trust me, they trust my husband and I because we know them, but trying to explain this program and trying to convince the other business owners was very, very difficult. I'm hoping they applied, but that's the reason why, I just keep pushing for a community center, because it's not only for business owners, but for residents. And like I said, if all nationalities, all races, is not just for the Spanish speakers. So thank you, Billy, for bringing that up. And I think the churches are a great way, even Paulo's church, since he's Brazilian, maybe there's a lot of Portuguese speakers at his church, but I think that's a start. Churches are a great way. And through our school district, we could, there's so many avenues that, I think better outreach, being accessible for services and resources, I think is so important. It benefits us because climate change affects everyone. It's just not, to one particular person or one particular neighborhood. It affects everyone. And the other thing I was going to mention just really quickly, in terms of housing, I think, it's so important, like to, try to advocate for housing, close to transit centers, so we could get people off, we could walk, to stores, along with housing, have, businesses, service businesses, restaurants, hair salons, things like that, close to transit center, just to get people off the cars. Old Town, we do a very good job of walking to the bank, walking to the post office, walking to the local markets. We have everything close by. We run out of tomatoes, oh, we'll just walk up the street. But I think, other neighborhoods in South San Francisco don't have that. So if we could do our part, and the city could, do their part, and, try to get housing and along transit centers, I think it'll go a long way. We could all do our part in, in climate change.
Thanks, Olga. I appreciate those comments. I'm going to turn it back over to Dave to just do, I think, 2 more slides, and then I think we'll send you guys all home for the afternoon.
Great. Paolo, did you have one final thought? I saw you raise your hand before we transition.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. I just want to say that, yes, our church is here to serve the city. And I jumped into this conversation. I wasn't planning to spend to stay here with all of you, but it was so good. And I just want to thank you all. I gotta go now, but I want to say that I want to keep connecting more with you and seeing how our church can serve the community and can serve the city of South City. So thank you, Olga. Thank you all for the opportunity. I really appreciate that. It was
thank you so much, Paolo.
More than I expected.
We really, really appreciate your time and effort. If you could actually stay on for 1 minute, I'm going to show you a couple examples about how we are going to continue to reach out if you can get folks involved. This was, we've had one meeting yesterday on sustainability and climate change. Obviously the meeting today, but we have 8 more meetings coming up from the 17th through the 31st. So please make note of these, share it with your colleagues, neighbors, constituents, whoever it may be. We'd love to see you at any or all of these meetings. They all will be recorded. They'll all go to the project website where there will be more kind of activities to continue on. The next one being tomorrow at 6 p.m. on health, environmental justice, and equity. Obviously a key topic that really kind of touches every single topic that we're talking about here. It's going to be a really important and great conversation. And just real quickly, on the website itself, as we mentioned, there are opportunities to continue to get involved through what we're calling these surveys, which is basically an opportunity to go and read all the detail in each one of these frameworks and apply specific comments to them. You can up and down vote them. You could apply comments on top of comments. Really is a way to be super interactive, and that's going to be available through April 16th. So please share that with folks as well. It's all on shapessf.com/policies -frameworks. No problem, Eric. So this is an example of how that works. Yeah, if you want to keep going, Eric, no problem. This is an example of how it works. So it's actually a PDF document that has the ability to add comments on top of it. And each comment populates, and then you can see folks' comments and actually comment on top of their comments. So it becomes very, very interactive. You can actually upload additional information as well if you have it. But again, it's a way for you to see comments from other members of the community, but then also provide your own and let this living and breathing document kind of live on throughout this entire process through mid-April. And then that'll get all translated into the ongoing development of these general plan elements. So really important piece of the puzzle here that we'd love for you all to share out to everyone you know. And I think that's all we had, and we're right at 1 o'clock, so perfect timing. As again, a reminder, everything is at shapessf.net or .com. All this information is housed there. If you have additional questions, Lisa Costa-Sanders is your contact at the city, lisa.costasanders@ssf.net. And with that, we will go ahead and wrap up this meeting. We very much appreciate your time and hope to see you again soon. Thanks all. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey, Eric. It's Ken.
Hey, Ken.
Hey, sorry if you didn't get a lot of your questions answered. I didn't mean to hijack your meeting. That wasn't my purpose at all. But I was just trying to throw some things out there for people to talk about, and I know we got kind of off subject. So I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no, actually, Ken, I really appreciated your comments. And I actually thought you created a space for people to talk about what they do during these impacts that the questions didn't. And I think it was probably a better conversation because of it. So thank you.
All right. Have a great day. And thanks. And if you need...
I'm serious.
Okay, yeah, thank you. We like having staff kind of give... Other than us staff, we're always involved with this. It's good to get feedback too, because you're the boots on the ground more than we are in a lot of these things, and so it's good to have your viewpoint as well.
All right, and then yeah, the local hazard mitigation plan is in the works. We're hoping to get that finished before the end of the year, and that means all 26